I stood at the edge of our old living room, surrounded by silence where laughter used to live. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of grief. The walls still smelled faintly of Mom's perfume, lavender and linen, soft and clean, the kind of scent that clung to you long after she hugged you. But even that smell was fading, just like her presence in this place. And now, the final act, her funeral, was happening without me. Please subscribe to our channel and tell me in comments from where are you watching this video? Because Dad had said no. He didn't just suggest it or say it in a moment of stress. He declared it. Cold. Final. You are not welcome at her funeral, Grace. She wouldn't want the drama. Drama. That's what he called it. The last time I saw my mom alive, we had held hands at the hospital as she whispered that she loved me. Her eyes were tired, her voice was barely a breath, but she'd said, "Promise me you'll forgive him someday, but not today. Today, you just be my daughter." And I was. I had been her daughter every day, through every hospital visit, every late-night panic, every medication schedule and insurance fight. I stayed when Dad stepped back. He couldn't handle her being weak. I could. I was. But now that she was gone, he was back in full control, pulling the strings like nothing had ever happened. He was the grieving husband, the devoted man beside the casket, the one accepting condolences while I was shut out like a stranger. He blamed me for the falling out between us. He said I turned Mom against him by always siding with her. But I wasn't choosing sides. I was choosing compassion over ego. I didn't lie for him. I didn't pretend she was okay when she wasn't. And maybe that was my real sin in his eyes. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday morning. I got the news through my aunt, not my father. No invitation, no call, no seat. And I was angry, furious, heartbroken. But mostly I was lost. I didn't know how to grieve when I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. The morning of the funeral, I didn't get dressed. I sat on the floor in my pajamas with a photo album in my lap, flipping pages I'd memorized 1,000 times. Mom in the kitchen, Mom on the porch, Mom laughing with her eyes crinkled in that way only she did, and somewhere between one page and the next, a wave of something cold and still settled in my chest. Not just sadness, but resolve. I stood up. I got dressed, not in black, not in navy. I wore her favorite yellow dress, the one she loved because she said it made me look like sunshine on a hard day. I pulled my hair into the braid she used to do for me in elementary school. I grabbed the box I had been building for months, something she didn't know about, something I wasn't even sure I'd ever show anyone. I drove in silence to the cemetery, knowing I would arrive long after the crowds were gone. I didn't want their pity or their whispers. I didn't need to see my father pretending to cry. I just needed to be near her. When I pulled up, the sun was beginning to set. The air was heavy with late summer heat and quiet. The chairs were folded. The flowers had begun to droop, and in the center of it all was the freshly turned earth, still raw and uneven, holding her body beneath. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I walked to the grave and knelt beside it, brushing dirt from the stone marker that hadn't yet been carved. And from the box I brought, I pulled the first letter. Mom and I had this thing. Every year on my birthday, she gave me a handwritten note. Just one page. Sometimes silly, sometimes wise. It was her way of telling me who she was in little pieces. She told me about her dreams, her regrets, her childhood. She called them her breadcrumb letters, a way for me to always find her, even when she was gone. So I had started writing her back. Every week since her diagnosis, I wrote her a letter, tucked it into the box, and promised myself I'd give them to her when she beat it. But she didn't. So now I would read them to her. I pulled out the first envelope. "Dear Mom," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "Today, you yelled at the nurse because she forgot to warm the blanket. You said cold blankets were a crime. I laughed. You said I looked tired. I lied and said I wasn't. You knew I was lying." Letter by letter, I read to her. I poured out every fear, every hope, every moment of the last 6 months. I read through the tears I never let her see when she was alive. And when I finished, I placed them gently into the ground beside the marker, tied in yellow ribbon, and covered them with a soft blanket of wildflowers I had picked that morning from her garden. It was then that I heard footsteps. I turned, and there he was, Dad. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised to see me. He looked broken. I stood up. For a second, I considered walking away, giving him the same silence he gave me, but I didn't. He looked at the flowers, at the letters, at me in the yellow dress, and then he said, voice cracked and low, "She would have loved that." I didn't answer. "I was wrong," he added. I didn't know how to lose her, and when you stayed strong, I thought you didn't feel it the way I did. I was jealous, angry, and I made you the enemy." Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't just lose her that day," he whispered. "I lost you." And then, slowly, shakily, he reached for his hand and removed his wedding ring. He placed it on the grave. "She asked me once if I could be strong without her," he said. "I wasn't, but maybe it's time I try." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cemetery. We stood there in silence, father and daughter, neither healed, but finally, maybe, starting to mend. And I realized then, forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing not to let it harden you. And in that moment, beneath the sky she used to watch from our porch swing, I chose softness for her. But it was only the beginning. A week passed after that silent moment at the cemetery, the moment that cracked open something I didn't even realize was still frozen between us. My father hadn't reached out since, and honestly, I hadn't expected him to. That moment by Mom's grave had felt like closure, or maybe just a pause in the years of emotional warfare we'd silently been fighting. But then, on a quiet Sunday morning, just as the sun was beginning to warm the frost off the window glass, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it, and there he was, my father, standing awkwardly, holding a dusty cardboard box with worn edges and tape peeling at the corners. I recognized it instantly. It was the box Mom had kept hidden in the attic, the one she'd always said was just old memories. I had never opened it, and neither had he, until now. Without a word, he handed it to me. "These are your mom's journals," he said softly. "She started them before you were born. I found them last night. She wrote about everything, about you, about us, about what she wished we'd do differently." I took the box with shaky hands. The top journal had her handwriting, elegant, warm, and familiar. I swallowed a lump in my throat. "I banned you from her funeral," he continued, his voice trembling, "because I was angry, because I thought you were the reason she held on longer, or maybe the reason she finally let go. But that wasn't fair. I punished you for loving her, and I punished myself too." His eyes met mine, tired, red, but sincere. "I can't undo what I did, but I'd like to start making things right." I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Do you want to come in?" We didn't fall into some movie-style reconciliation. There were no dramatic embraces, no tearful monologues, but we talked. At first, about Mom, her laugh, her stubbornness, her way of singing to the radio like no one was listening. Then about the past, his grief, my hurt, and all the silences that had formed like walls between us. Over the next few weeks, he came over more often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with another memory he'd finally been brave enough to confront. One night, he brought an old shoebox filled with photos of the three of us on camping trips, birthday parties, even just mundane Tuesday mornings. It was the first time I'd seen him cry without shame. Then, one afternoon, while sitting on the porch that my mom had loved so much, we read a line from her journal together. It said, "If they ever drift apart, I hope they find each other again at the place where love always begins, with forgiveness." We looked at each other, and for the first time in years, I saw not the man who had shut me out, but the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had loved my mother deeply, even if grief had made him forget how to love her memory gently. We were still healing, but we were doing it side by side now. And somewhere, I think Mom was smiling, knowing that her love had brought us back to